We've seen our fair share of missing person cases over the last few months, and just because the summer season is practically over, that won't stop the numbers from declining. The only thing we can do is to spread the awareness for the problem and hope that we can encourage folks to take extreme caution when venturing outdoors. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. Number 10. On August 14th of 2000, a 49-year-old woman named Ruthanne Ruppert disappeared in the Curry Village area of Yosemite National Park. Around noon that day, Ruthanne was scheduled to go on a backpacking trip in the park, but had to postpone it due to an infection. She is believed to have gone on a day hike from Yosemite Falls to the Foresta area based on witness observation. Ruppert's backpack was eventually found 8 years later in 2008 and in the Fireplace Creek drainage area, consistent with the hiking route from Yosemite Falls to Foresta. But despite an intense search by park rangers and volunteers for 2 weeks after her disappearance, no other trace of her was found. Number 9. On April 8th of 1991, a 47-year-old named Dan Campbell was reported missing inside Yellowstone National Park after failing to report back to family members. Dan and his Australian Shepherd dog were dropped off at Hell-Roaring Creek Trailhead on April 6th and had planned to hike to Jardina, Montana, where he would then be picked up by a friend, but he never arrived. Dan was reported missing on April 8th, and despite an extensive week-long search, no trace of him or his dog were ever found. Number 8. On March 31st of 1993, a 23-year-old man named Jeffrey Zoltowski vanished during a hike in the Waialua Valley region on the island of Molokai. He flagged down a helicopter from the Department of Land and Natural Resources that day due to difficulties with his feet during a 14-mile hike that he was on. He was on his way back and had about 6 miles left to go when he flagged for the help. Jeffrey asked the helicopter pilot if he could get a ride, but was refused because it was not a life-threatening situation, according to the pilot. The pilot then stated he could charter a plane for $650, but Jeffrey could not afford it. However, the ranger did bring back the man's 60-pound backpack, and it remained at the DLNR's headquarters for 40 days before he was reported missing. Jeffrey had traveled to Hawaii to explore, hike, and determine what he wanted to do with his life. At the time of his disappearance, he was a student at Wayne State University in Michigan. Number 7. On August 7th of this year, a 34-year-old man named Nicholas Larson was reported missing inside the Wrangell Elias National Park and Preserve in Alaska. Nicholas was last seen at McCarthy Lodge by other campers. He told his family and park employees that he had planned on a solo backpacking trip into the backcountry of the park on August 2nd and had planned to return by the 7th. When he failed to return, he was reported missing that same day. Despite a large search effort consisting of over several dozen searchers, no trace of him was found. Number 6. On August 14th, 2013, a 25-year-old man named Thomas Cook vanished in the rural regions of Pueblo, Colorado. Thomas and his father had gotten into an argument, and Thomas left the house to clear his mind. It was thought that he was headed back to Wichita, Kansas, to be with his family and friends. His only way to get there would have been to hitchhike, but he never arrived in the Wichita area or returned back to his father's home in Colorado. Thomas had failed to contact anyone he knew or even logged into any of his social networks. Those who knew him stated that it was completely out of character to disappear without any contact and even the medications he was using to treat depression. On top of that, he left behind 2 children, and despite a large search of the area, no trace of him was ever found. Number 5. On June 7th of 1989, a 76-year-old woman vanished outside of her remote pioneer home in Amador County in California. Ruth Jacobus was last seen by her longtime husband around noon that day as she wandered outside to grab something from their gardening shed. She never returned. Her husband reported her missing immediately after she went missing, and an intense 5-day search of the area produced no results. There was no evidence that foul play was involved in her disappearance. Ruth had knee problems, which prevented her from walking very far or for too long. She also left her glasses inside the home and couldn't have made it very far without them. On the day she disappeared, she was wearing a bright blue dress, which should have made it easier for searchers to find her. The area where she disappeared is a balance of bald hills and heavily wooded areas, surrounded by steep canyon terrain. Ruth was not suffering from amnesia or dementia, and to this day, no trace of her has ever been found. Number 4. On September 30th of 1982, a 3-year-old boy vanished within the Sugar Bush area of Minnesota. Kevin Jay Ayotte was last seen playing in the upstairs of his family's summer cabin around 4:45 p.m. that day. His mother went outside for a moment, and when she returned, the boy was gone. Kevin's Springer Spaniel puppy had also disappeared with him, but his older brother was still inside the home. An extensive 9-day search of the area turned up no sign of him. The older brother had not noticed anything suspicious around the time of Kevin's disappearance. About a week later, the boy's dog reappeared and was in good health. Police put a tracking collar on the dog and let it go, hoping it would lead officials to Kevin, but it just kept returning home. The area around the cabin is heavily wooded and boggy. In fact, Old Mill State Park, Voyageurs National Park, and Mississippi National River and Recreation Area are all well within a short distance of where the boy had vanished. To this day, and over 35 years later, no information has come forward as to the boy's whereabouts. Number 3. On March 20th of this year, David O Sullivan left Ireland to embark on a 5-month trek along the Pacific Crest Trail, starting in Southern California and ending in Canada. The 25-year-old planned to stop at various towns along the way, relying on local Wi-Fi to update his family on his whereabouts. Because he was a novice hiker, he carefully planned his route, avoiding alpine conditions and areas of heavy snows and rough terrain. However, the last contact he had with his family was on April 7th, and he was not heard from since. He emailed them from the mountain of Idlewild in Southern California. David was also due to meet a friend in Santa Barbara in early May, but never showed. There were some rumored sightings of David in Southern California months after he was reported missing, but nothing was ever substantiated. According to those who knew him, it was unlike him to not make regular contact with his family. The Pacific Crest Trail spans over 2,600 miles from Mexico to Canada through California, Oregon, and Washington, closely aligning with the Cascade Ranges. Number 2. On September 1st of 1975, a 4-year-old boy disappeared at the Natanis Point campground in Chain of Ponds, Maine, just 6 miles from the Canadian border. Kurt Newton was camping with his parents, older sister, and 3 other families from their hometown of Manchester, Maine. Kurt was riding his tricycle near the family's campsite when he vanished between the hours of 10 a.m. and 10:30 that morning. An extensive search of the surrounding woods, which involved the use of bloodhounds and several military helicopters, was described as the biggest search in Maine's history. Police theorized that he became confused while trying to get back to the campsite and wandered off into oblivion. But despite the search, no trace of him was ever found, and to this day, this case remains unsolved. Number 1. On June 3rd of 1985, 2 men vanished while out on their trip to the East Canyon Reservoir in Utah. 21-year-old David Jaramillo and 14-year-old Lloyd Reese had planned a 2-day boating trip with 2 other friends within the reservoir, and at some point during their outing, Jaramillo and Reese became separated from the other 2. After several hours of waiting and calling out for the friends, the other 2 friends became concerned and left the area. Because no one at the time owned a cell phone, the 2 other friends had to drive back down the canyon before calling police to report them missing. A large search was coordinated that same day, involving more than 100 searchers that included search dogs, dive teams, horseback teams, volunteers, and park rangers. Despite these combined efforts, no trace of either men were ever found. This case continues to baffle experts. And there you go. Just 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. If you have a case you'd like to bring to my attention, or just something to update us on, feel free to do so in the comments section below. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos.